Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning on the webinar for food safety and the technology revolution. We'd like to welcome our panel guest, Marnie Carlin, who is Executive Director of CEA Food Safety Coalition, an independent member-based organization established to develop credible, strong, and appropriate food safety standards and communicate the value of the controlled environment agriculture. She has over 2 decades of experience in federal policymaking, advocacy, nonprofit management, and corporate law. I find it quite interesting that you have a degree in culinary arts from Cordon Bleu in Paris. Very impressive. Thank you for joining us. We also have Dr. Jennifer McEntire, who is Senior Vice President of Food Safety and Technology at United Fresh Produce Association. She's a food microbiologist by background and has spent the past 20 years in Washington, D.C., bringing the scientific perspective to food safety regulatory issues. She was previously Vice President of Science Operations at the Grocery Manufacturers Association, and she also had roles as VP and Chief Science Officer at the Echelon Group and Senior Staff Scientist and Director of Science and Technology projects at the Institute of Food Technologies. We also have on with us with BioSafe Systems, Michael LaRose. He started his career with BioSafe in 2008, providing technical support to specialty vegetables and fruit growers in the crop advisory throughout the United States. He has done extensive time in the Pacific Northwest, Central California coast, and Mid-Atlantic growing regions, gaining diverse agronomic production experience and education. He is now working as a role with BioSafe in our food safety division. For this panel, if you have any questions, it will be an open discussion. If you have any questions for any member of the panel or for the panel in general, please put it in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. With that said, again, thank you everyone for joining. I'm going to open up the first question to the entire panel, and I'll just kind of go, clockwise, starting with Jennifer. How has technology progressed within the industry over the past 5 years?
That's a great question. And, I think technology has progressed within the industry in the past 5 years, similarly to the way that it's progressed in all of our lives. We're doing this virtually. You think about the reliance on, as a consumer, just our reliance on technology and how dramatically that's shifted over the past years. And I think that the industry has felt the same thing and for the most part adapted in the same ways, recognizing where maybe they were on the fence a little bit before about making the investment in some of these technologies, seeing that in order to survive, in order to thrive, these investments are well worth it. Understanding your supply chain, particularly as supply chains were disrupted last year, having a better sense over your production, your customers' needs, where your vehicles are. I think there's been tremendous appetite for understanding how these new technologies can be integrated in a way that really benefits the industry and isn't just viewed as a cost, a nice to have, a shiny new object sort of thing. So I can think of, when we say technology, it's such a broad term. We can look at what's happening within operations. So within the growing environments, within the handling and production environments, the use of technology to capture data and understand trends, be better able to forecast based on past experience, based on looking at data trends, being able to see when maybe from a food safety standpoint, when you might be close to having an issue where you're in that uncomfortable space, having much better grasp over your data, how to use your data, and then even externally working with customers, transmitting information we were in a position for quite a while where it was very difficult to have on-site audits. So how do you get your paperwork to another entity? How is it in a form that they can understand, that they can easily digest this information? So the applications of technology over the past 5 years for sure, certainly over the past year, have been really numerous. And I think it's really exciting. And I anticipate that as we look toward the next 5 years, we're only going to see greater adoption.
Marnie, you're the one to my right. Can you answer that as well?
Absolutely. And I really appreciate being here. It's really exciting to be a part of this conversation. I would echo pretty much everything that Jennifer said. And so I think I'll speak just for a moment about the specifics of how we've seen technology be really the underpinning of controlled environment agriculture production. My members are greenhouse growers, vertical farms, other indoor production, and technology enables them to innovate and farm the way they do. Without technology, so much of what our members do inside and how they are able to manage the data around the entire process, from the seed all the way through the growing process and then through storage and shipping, all of that is enabled by technology. Some of our members sometimes say they're tech companies who produce food, which I think they're also certainly farmers, but I think it's critical to think about that, and it enables so many things. As Jennifer said, it enables us to have a closer perspective on everything that's going on with every plant at every moment. And so, should there be any concern, any potential food safety issue, any potential disease or illness, we can see that through the data, identify it and remove it much more quickly than we would have been able to without technology enabling us to see that. And so that's a huge benefit. And I'll just very quickly touch, because I think you can't sort of not touch on the past year, as Jennifer did, and the fact that we've all, in our personal lives and our professional lives, learned to be more resilient and to use technology to enable that resilience through the last year. And CEA producers are no exception to that. They've been able to figure out ways to be resilient to the supply chain challenges, and to figure out ways to meet demand and meet needs where they are, based on tech and the ability to have data to have and analyze data about our plants throughout the process. So also to echo Jennifer, I would say this is just the beginning, or in fact, maybe not even the beginning, just the continuation. And I anticipate there's so much that we don't even know about. In 5 years from now, who knows what we'll be saying about how we are using technology to bring a safe and healthy and nutritious product to consumers. But I'm sure we'll be saying things that we can't even imagine today.
Thank you. Mike, on the manufacturing and supply side of it, what have you seen in the last 5 years in that development?
So yeah, and I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to speak with joining this talk with Jennifer and Marnie. When I was reflecting on this topic yesterday, just kind of, or this morning, sitting and collecting my thoughts, I was thinking back to how, when I first came into this industry, I thought of myself, my generation, as technology gurus. We understood the technology better than any other generation out there. And when I came out of college, that's when Facebook had just got started. YouTube was becoming a huge hit, and everything was starting to be connected. All of our tools and equipment we were using was starting to be connected to the Internet of Things. And so over the last 5 years, it's been unreal how much automation has been brought into the industry, how much data capturing and data mining and utilization of data, good or bad, is helping in the industry help track our food, aid in food safety, aid in identifying recalls, potential recalls, aiding in traceability, but most importantly, it's giving transparency to the end user and the consumers. And there's no doubt that the technology revolution has brought an immense amount of value into the produce industry, whether you're growing in the field or in a controlled environment. But I think we're just as Jennifer, I'm just going to echo what Jennifer and Marnie already mentioned, is that it can't even forecast or fathom what type of new revolutions will be coming down our way in the next 5 to 10 years with the pace that we're at currently. And again, with 2020 wrapping up and stepping into 2021, it's only more apparent how much we're utilizing technology to do the things that we used to do, the things we used to do differently, such as a lot of times we would have been sitting around the table doing this panel discussion in person at a trade show. And those are a little bit of a thing of the past here lately. So technology is definitely like a steamroller going through not just this industry, across all the industries, but definitely in agriculture, it's been much more well adopted over the last 5 to 10 years than I've seen in the past. Yeah.
Okay. Did any of you want to add to that, or if not, we'll move on to the next question. Good. All right. So next question I have is, where, if any, do you feel there might be holes in the system and within the supply chain? And I'll go ahead and throw this question to Marnie.
Holes in the system. I think I'm really excited to hear what everyone else has to say here. I think that there's always opportunity for us to continue to connect the dots, right? So the sort of understanding data works as far as we have data, right? And so to the extent we are missing some information, we have to sort of connect those dots. One of the areas where many CEA farms are really fortunate is that they are vertically integrated, which can enhance their traceability from seed all the way to the customer, right? So they can collect the data all the way through at every stage and really see where perhaps there are some spots to think about or spots to dig deeper on. And I think that's, when we don't have that vertical integration, or when we have to rely on others to also be monitoring data and using technology and talking to each other about it, I think that can sometimes create a little bump, but certainly not one that's insurmountable.
Jennifer, would you like to?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that come to mind, recognizing the tremendous diversity of the industry in terms of operations and in terms of their maturity and their resources. So, there are companies who are doing some pretty amazing, like Star Trek-like things with technology, but then there are others that kind of lag behind, maybe want to wait and see the experience of those early adopters. So it's hard to make a generalized statement about gaps, but to Marnie's point, there are definitely some opportunities out there. Marnie mentioned traceability. I'm passionate about traceability, so much so that I can't even talk about it because I would just go on forever. So I'll skip that topic, at least for right now. But a comment I heard very early in my career, actually, which is a long time ago now, and when we didn't have anything like the technology we have today, is that the food industry has always had a lot of data. There's always been tons of testing and monitoring and capture of data. But where the food industry maybe fell a little bit short was in making use of those data. So the stacks of binders and file folders of paper records. And I think we are at that point. I think we've we've passed that tipping point where we now can capture these data electronically and use them and start to make good decisions. Not everybody is there. There's still, more paper, I'd say, within this industry than within some others. There are resource constraints within this industry that you don't have in, some of the higher profit industries. But there has definitely been a shift, and I would attribute it in part to the fact that we do have younger people coming into this industry who have grown up with technology. So kids who are graduating college now, who are starting their careers, have never known life without technology. And I have tried to impress upon some of our members who are maybe, a little more old school, a little more conservative, that the expectation of this newer generation is that there is technology. That just has to be the default. So having paper-based systems, monitoring your wash water with a test strip every hour, that's going to be odd to people who are younger, who are so accustomed to having everything digital, to having things be what I think is cool, they probably think is normal. And so we don't, as an industry, want to fall behind and start losing this talent, this expertise, because we haven't adopted technology to the extent that some other industries have. So that's part of the opportunity that I see is recruiting, making sure that we're adopting technology so that we can recruit good talent.
That's actually a great point you bring up, Jennifer, as far as attracting the talent coming in out of college and being in an industry that is reflecting the skill sets they've learned, while in school, and they're coming at school. You've got all the latest technology there in the classroom, and you're getting to see the latest and greatest. And then you step into the real world, and things you quickly learn things are all like what you learned in school. But I've seen such a tremendous shift, and especially within agriculture, because when I came into the industry, and it wasn't all that long ago, 10, 15 years ago, but in that short span of 10, 15 years, it's been amazing how the stigma of agriculture, at the time was, little not as tech savvy, older generation, thick-headed, stuck in our ways, weren't readily adopting new ways of doing things, which was it was a stigma, it was a perception, wasn't the real perception, what was really going on in the ag industry. Because over the last 10, 15 years, the innovations that have come along that are directly related to our advancements in technology have been tremendous. You've got harvesting equipment now that is automating things that we never dreamed would be able to be automated. Color sorting equipment on the packing house that could scan berries at thousands per minute, millions per minute, and be able to reject good, bad. All of that is not only helping us collect information and data to help increase our efficiencies, but it's also helping address sustainability, reducing the it helps in an industry where we struggle sometimes with being able to keep labor and have enough labor to be able to do the tasks that we need to do on the farm. Technology is really helping in many ways to help reallocate that labor and utilize that labor in other ways where things, some of the more minutiae things within the process can now be automated. It's amazing. Like I started off saying, I came into this industry thinking that, I knew I had all the greatest innovations and the technology at my fingertips, and was kind of passionate about it. I liked learning about all the new technology items, but I even let myself start slipping and Yeah, I remember when Twitter first came out, I couldn't understand the whole concept of tweeting and people tweeting one another, and you know, it's with politics the way it is, that's, yeah, Twitter became a pretty big sensation over the last 4 to 8 years. But now Twitter's gone, now people are TikToking. and that one kind of caught me really by surprise. So, and that was only within the last 2 years. So it's just kind of a reason I want to grasp. The reason I bring that up is that it's amazing how fast things can evolve in a short period of time. I feel like that TikTok thing came out of nowhere, but now it's you know, the next leading craze on social media. And the other thing too, is I was kind of looking at some statistics before we hopped on here. And the last report that they did on this is from Trust in Food, it's a Farm Journal survey. They had noted that 62% of farmers are not using, they're collecting data, but 62% are not utilizing that data to drive everyday decisions or to drive their planning and forecasting for the following year. So that's a pretty big number, and that's exactly kind of leading, building off what Jennifer had mentioned. Ag has had a lot of data at its fingertips for a long time. I mean, every 7 years, we're doing a census that's collecting very specific information at the farm level across the country. It's utilizing that data and utilizing it the right way that I think is still an area where we have some improvement and some work to do.
Thank you. Kind of elaborating on a couple of things Jennifer had mentioned. How do we make that technology more accessible to the small and medium-sized growers out there?
So clearly part of it is cost, right? But I always am cautious when I make that comment that I found within the entirety of the produce industry, really within the entirety of the food industry, that while people may say that cost is a barrier, people always have the money to invest for things that are going to be beneficial to them. So it's not just cost, it's what is the cost versus what is the benefit. So the money is there, and even smaller companies are willing, I've observed, they are willing to make these investments when they see what the benefit's going to be. So it's that balance, it's that ratio of the cost. When, how long will it take before there's that return on investment? And Michael said something about labor earlier, and I think that this year has shown us also the consequences of having shortages within your staff. So I think that equation, the balance, it's shifted. It continues to shift. So things that maybe seem pretty expensive relative to the benefit, now we say, oh, we need that benefit. So, kind of changes the mindset, and I think changes the perception of cost. The accessibility, the understanding of what does this technology do. It's not just the vendor who is responsible for communicating that, because sometimes vendors tell you what you want to hear, right? So I think having that peer network, having that community of individuals who have leveraged this technology, who've been not only successful, but also unsuccessful. What didn't work? Where were things a little more difficult than they anticipated? Were there hidden costs? It's the capital investment versus an ongoing cost. So I think some of it is the conversation that occurs within the industry and seeing that other people are doing this. And I don't want to be the last one to adopt this. There's a little bit of peer pressure that sometimes can work to the advantage as well.
Yeah, I actually wanted to key off of some of what you just said, Jennifer. I think that's absolutely right. And I was going to mention that I think so much for some of the smaller farms or some of the entities that are maybe a little more conservative about that cost benefit analysis, because that's exactly what it is. It's figuring out, is it worth it for me to spend this money on this? What am I going to get for this, right? You know, and whereas 2 years ago, what am I going to get for a Zoom membership may have seemed like, I don't need that, that's fine. Now we all need that, right? So it's that continued evolution of that conversation. But I think a point that you made that I thought was really something that I've seen a lot in the industry is that cohort peer network, that opportunity for farmers who are either further along, more developed, bigger, have a more ability to take on costs, or just more willing to be that innovator. You know, it may not be that they, you know, it may not be that they're bigger. It may just be that they are first adopters, right? Who then can engage with their peers and say, here's what's working for me, here's what's not, here's what I thought was going to be super valuable, and it turns out it really wasn't. Here's what here's what has turned out to be super valuable. We see that, I know you do too, Jennifer, at United Fresh. We see that among our members all the time, talking to each other and sharing that thinking, and the value that folks get from not recreating the wheel every time, not recreating the thinking every time is huge. The other driver that I've thought about a lot, and obviously I work in the CEA sector now, and in the past, I started my career in agriculture in the organic sector. And so I often will think about consumer-driven adoption of things, right? Because when you think about organic, and when you think about CEA as well, a lot of that is driven by consumer demand, by consumers saying, I want to make my purchasing decision based on XYZ factors, and farmers or companies saying, all right, let me figure out how to meet that need. And I actually think that's true with regard to technology as well. Maybe not quite so granularly, but when you take the step back and think about, you know, when consumers say, I want to know where my food comes from, well, as a company or a farmer, I may need to think about technology solutions that allow me to communicate the information to that consumer that they are demanding. And to come back to something that was said in the earlier conversation, I think a lot of that is evolution as newer generations become consumers who are more driving the conversation, right? I haven't read the data in a long time, so I'm not sure whether it's, you know, young families in their mid-20s to mid-30s, or where it is where the demand is really being driven. But as that segment of the consumer population becomes more and more tech savvy, which is just a matter of time passing, right? From when it was my generation who didn't have a cell phone at that time in our lives, to the current generation who never knew life without a cell phone. You know, you're going to have consumers saying, I want to be able to pick up my package and when of leafy greens, and when I look at it, learn the following sets of information. And when consumers are saying that, like I said, then you're going to have farmers and companies and trade associations thinking, all right, how do we meet that demand so that we can be selling our product to consumers?
Well, we have some questions coming in from the attendees. If I could throw these out here. First one is, what are you seeing as hurdles to automation in not only data collection, but in physical processes such as harvesting and packaging? Who would like to start with that?
So I think one of the hurdles that we see in automation, particularly
It's 11:30.
within the harvesting and packing side, is in some cases it just doesn't exist. You know, there are some products that are less amenable to automated harvesting. So there are some commodities that it works well, the equipment has been developed, and then there are others where it just, you know, we haven't quite figured it out yet. So, and in order to figure it out, it takes time. You know, it may take a year or 2 or 3 to develop or re-engineer a piece of equipment. So it's not an overnight off the shelf. You know, these are highly specialized, customized processes that need to be developed. So some of the hurdle is just that stuff doesn't always exist, even if you want it.
Yeah, no, actually, and Jennifer, that's a great point. Strawberries is one of the things I could get you. We've had the ability to, uh, mechanically harvest strawberries. I've seen articles and following it at trade events for over the last 5 years. Um, and yes, they have a little robot that can go down the row and pick the right berries and know which ones are ready to be picked, which ones still need to stay in the vine. But is it implementable on 1,000-acre farm or even 100-acre farm for that matter? No, yeah, the technology just isn't quite there yet. So yes, the capabilities there, and I think there's a lot of perceptions at the consumer level where they see some of these things maybe on the news or some article that they got this little robot now that can harvest strawberries, but why do I still see 1,000 laborers out in the field picking strawberries? It's just that technology hasn't caught up to what to the real world actual making it efficient, economical, and viable in a real world operation. It's some of those things aren't there yet, but I have no doubt. If you had told me 10 years ago that they'd have the capability for a drone to go out and spot treat for powdery mildew or botrytis in a vineyard, I would have said, no way. How could that thing hold enough liquid to get out there? But now they're doing it. And not only that, they're heat mapping fields. And so it's amazing how far, these things have come in the last 5 to 10 years. But there's some very specialized tasks that we do and skill sets that we in the industry and humans have that is tough to replicate with technology. Harvesting is one of those things. Knowing when the right time is to harvest is another one. It's some of it's a little intuition. So you can't replace everything with technology, but I think the areas that we're really looking at enhancing technology and putting them into adoption is those areas that will really benefit both the industry as a whole and the farmer, and help make that small farmer operate more efficiently so he can get his product to market in a more broader way, access a broader area of customer base versus maybe just staying local. That's kind of how I've seen it.
Thank you all for that. Have a question specifically for Jennifer and Marnie. Are your organizations and others you may be working in tandem with, working with state and federal legislators to develop future food safety protocols?
So
This is where Jennifer might get into the traceability on this one.
Yeah, maybe I'll pop in first with a little bit of what we're doing, and we're also working in conjunction with United Fresh on some things. So I'll leave some of that for for you to talk about. But we, the CEA Food Safety Coalition, we were founded in part to really think about how the existing food safety standards and protocols make sense, and maybe in some areas don't entirely make sense for indoor production. And where perhaps there are some gaps, to try to fill those gaps, to say, look, we need to hold ourselves to high food safety standards. And if the existing food safety standards aren't asking all the right questions, because through no fault of their own, because they were developed thinking about field production, and so didn't ask a question about what do you do if a light bulb shatters, because why would you ask such a question? But when it comes to an indoor production, you should ask that question. There should be an answer to that question. And so that's been one of our key priorities since our founding in mid-2019. And we've been working, so a couple of things. You asked about legislators, and I'll get to that in a second. We've been working internally as a sector, and also in conjunction with some folks on Jennifer's team at United Fresh, to identify those gaps, to develop questions to fill those gaps. And very soon we'll be announcing a CEA specific food safety addendum that can be used by our members or audited to by our members on top of existing food safety standards. So of course, our members would still adhere to the existing food safety standards, but could also certify to adherence to an additional set of questions that are very specific to CEA production. And our goal is that that will allow our members to communicate the additional areas where they're taking where they're taking food safety precautions, because the way we produce is different. So we hope that it'll do that, and then it'll also encourage folks, members of ours who maybe aren't already adhering to those, to do so, to be able to do so and then communicate that to their customers. The other thing I'll just quickly mention, because you asked about legislators, and we are absolutely also working on an advocacy approach with legislators and the FDA, and to some extent USDA, although that's different issues, not food safety necessarily or specifically, to ensure from where we sit that CEA production is considered when they think about ag policy and when they think about food safety, that they should be thinking about these questions and thinking about asking questions about recirculating water and how do you test recirculating water, or light bulbs, or whatever the questions may be that are not issues for field producers, but are for our indoor producers. And then of course, on the flip side, there are probably some issues that are issues for field producers and less so for indoor, and acknowledging those as well. So that's one of our top priorities for this year. We're working hard.
Yeah, from my end at United Fresh, our office is 3 blocks from the White House. So we're very active on Capitol Hill. I'm more active on the FDA side at the agency level, working more so at the federal level with FDA than at the states, although occasionally there are specific issues and or commodities that are more closely related to certain states. So, when we were updating our tomato food safety metrics, not only did we include FDA, but we had representatives from the state of Florida. When I'm working on papaya issues, it's not just FDA, but it's also the kind of their counterpart in Mexico, Seneca. There have been numerous issues associated with various California products grown in California. So working with California Department of Food and Agriculture, as well as California Department of Public Health. So yeah, it's this is a community effort. I see my role and the role of the association as being kind of a nexus, a liaison, a communicator to represent the concerns and the advances that the industry has made to these other groups. Certainly within the regulatory side, but also to academia, to the press. So that's part of what I love about the work that I've always been able to do, is that I get to work with different people who come at these problems from very different perspectives. But knowing that we're all looking for solutions, that we all hold food safety as the top priority, it makes it really interesting and very, very satisfying from my perspective. So yeah, my life is full of examples of working with the regulators. It's what I love to do.
There's a question I think that actually kind of pulls off of this. Question and comment is, no doubt the industry has a wealth of technologies that are providing data. One hurdle that many folks face is turning this data into actionable recommendations, real-time action. How do you see the technology sector addressing and turning that data into actions?
I can start. I think there is a responsibility of the producer to know what are the questions they want answered by these data. What is the problem they're trying to solve? And then seek the solution that can, to me, a prerequisite is digitizing the data. It's very difficult to eyeball numbers on pieces of paper, but it is, I'm reluctant to have a software provider, a technology company come in and kind of tell you what you need to know. It's your business. You should know what's valuable to you. What are the issues you're facing? Where do you want more insight? And then work with the software provider or evaluate different technology providers who may be able to offer that type of insight. So I think, first step is, are your data digital, excuse me, digital? But then, okay, so what? Like, what do you want to do here once you have these data? And I think Michael had said, with respect to the production, there's some intuition that I don't know that we're ever going to be able to fully remove the person factor, because people do need to make decisions about what it is they want, and then leverage technology. Technology is a tool. Leverage technology to help you do what you want to do, but that decision-making responsibility is always going to be with the person.
Yeah, and I think this is a really key topic, because in those some of the stats and surveys that I was reading off before, I mean, one of the things they found, 50% of those farms collecting data are collecting it on still paper records, and so that's 50% of the operations. And this was this survey was done more with specialty, the people we're really working with, specialty vegetable and fruit growers. So a lot of that is on paper, and it's Jennifer, made a good point. Is like, what is the information that is critical for me to capture? Well, a lot of that, United Fresh and CEA, but both organizations have been instrumental. I consider them the linchpin between the growers, retailers, buyers of produce, and then solution providers like ourselves that can help facilitate growers and help them identify, here's the information you're capturing. Here's the information that, and again, these are things that United Fresh has championed and championed it from the industry level, while working with USDA, FDA, and other influencers within Washington, to be able to say, yeah, this information is important to be transparent about, and this is the way we need to capture it, and it's how long you need to capture it for, and how to just disseminate it and get it in front of people. So that's where companies like Primus and some of these data solution providers, some of the companies doing the audits, are now providing a lot of those services. But at the end of the day, it's in the same survey, 49, and again, 50% of the growers don't believe that that other people should be able to dictate how they're operating their farm and their operation. And I do have there's some truth behind that, but there's also, this is the age of transparency. That is the word that is used not just in this industry. It's the big catchphrase now across from industry to politics. So there's a level of transparency that's just it's just the new norm now. Being able to scan a QR code on tomatoes and be able to see a picture pop up of the field it was grown in. Consumers like that. When I first tried it, I thought it was pretty cool. Now, of course, growers are smart. They figured out a way. This can be a new value tool for me. Of course, that photo of the fields look pristine. I mean, and the tomatoes on the vine, and they look perfect. So you can be really smart about it. You're meeting a need. You're meeting a requirement that's being asked of them for as far as traceability goes, but you can be innovative on how you present that, and it can be a tool for you, or it can work against you if you're not smart about it, and you take a picture while your sprayer is going through the field and a guy in a Tyvek suit is in the cab. Consumers may not perceive that the way you want them to perceive it. So how we utilize that data and present it, it's not just collecting it and spitting it out there. It's being smart about how you're how you're utilizing it and how you're being transparent with it. And that's where companies like BioSafe and organizations like United Fresh and CEA, that's what we're here to help growers with, is to help make them more comfortable about how transparent they need to be. Do you need to provide all the information you're doing, how you're operating the farm? No, definitely not. Just like I wouldn't want, there's a lot of information getting streamed out of my home on a daily basis from all the Internet of things connected. Obviously, I wouldn't want somebody coming in telling me how to mop the floor or vacuum the house, how often. But that at the end of the day, that information is being collected, and how we utilize it is the important part.
Yeah, and I would just briefly circle back to something that Jennifer said that I thought was really, really right on. It was sort of what I was thinking as this question was being asked, which was that it's incumbent on us, and when I say us, I mean the producers, the growers, to think about how, and the coalitions like ourselves and like United Fresh, to think about how do we need to use this data? How do we need this data to work for us? What questions are we looking to answer? And then engage with the technology solutions and other tools to make it work for us in that way, right? But to expect necessarily a technology company to understand exactly what our needs are, we shouldn't expect anyone to understand exactly what our needs are, right? We have to articulate our own needs. And similarly, here, I think technology is only as good as I believe, as the humans who think about what do we need it to do for us, and how do we need to ask the right questions to come up with answers that can then be actionable and can then lead us to real, policy change or change in how we produce that is responsive to regulators or consumers or retailers or whomever.
That's actually a great, Marnie, you bring up a great point, because that's one of the questions that was asked in the survey to producers about how they're using data. It's 70% of them stated that they're utilizing data software, but they don't feel it's meeting their needs. So 70%, I mean, that's a big number of people who have made the investment and took that next step to innovate their business, but they feel it's not doing what they expected it to do or what they were told it would do. And that's, going back to the point Jennifer made, that is a challenge, and that falls squarely a lot, on us manufacturers and vendors, for us to be transparent back to the people we're helping, because there's a lot of promises here, and in theory, yes, this technology can do these things for you, but in practice, people need to be realistic, and they need to understand, one, the business that they're selling this solution into. Agriculture's not, it's not just like making a widget. It's a lot different, a lot more variables in agriculture, and the whole chain right down the line to the retailer, that make this different than just manufacturing a normal, Yeti mug. It's a perishable, it's different. So it's important for us as manufacturers to be transparent back to the producer just as much as we're expecting them to be transparent to us.
So we have about 10 minutes left. Jennifer, yes, you wanted to maybe add on to that a little bit. We still have one question from the audience.
Go ahead with the last question, because I saw it and I like it and I want to answer it.
Good. So, as representatives of growers and processors, what would you like to see from the various manufacturers to alleviate common pain points in food safety?
So I think first, as Michael just said, it's that two-way conversation. So it's the understanding who the customer is, understanding who the vendor is, where if it's a match, you know, allowing the vendor the opportunity to continue to innovate, to meet the needs of the producers, so having a little bit of flexibility, patience, maybe in trying to establish if there's a good relationship to be built. I think one of the challenges that the industry faces in selecting a vendor, selecting a manufacturer, because there can be a lot, you know, for certain types of solutions, there can be a lot of competition in the marketplace, is trying to discern who does what. So how do I make a choice? How do I distinguish one from the other? And so one of the things that our Food Safety Council did maybe a year or two ago was come up with this little like vendor assessment tool to help the industry. If it's this type of vendor who's approaching you, here are some questions you can ask to try to gauge who are they and what do they actually do, and ask some of those more difficult questions that may not initially be disclosed in the marketing presentation. What I would love to evolve this to, and this may be a bit of a idealistic pipe dream here, but to have some sort of side by sides, you know, ask if there are 5 different companies who offer a similar sort of solution, you think, as an industry member, to ask a standardized set of questions and be able to sort of compare and contrast. I feel like it's, you know, trying to pick your cell phone provider that you can't quite line them up. You know, you can't quite figure out what the bells and whistles are between all of them to make an informed decision. So I think some of it is the transparency of, as a software provider or a solution provider, any sort of vendor service, what are the limitations of what you do? So, you know, being honest about what you can do, and then things that you just can't do, and where you're willing to innovate. That's where I think it's engaging with the industry and having that conversation and coming to a mutual understanding. That's where I see the greatest benefit. And then we can solve all sorts of food safety problems.
Gosh, I love so much of what you just said. I think, you know, when you were talking about the side by side and apples to apples, you know, you're right. It's so difficult because it's not apples to apples, because none of this is off the shelf sort of one size fits all. It's understandable why it's not, why that doesn't work, but it's also hard then to navigate. And so to have some sort of tool that might be able to identify where you can make those comparisons, understanding that there are areas where things might be different, that would be so helpful. I also wanted to touch on a couple of things that you said, because I thought they really resonated with me and with some of my members' experience. One is really kind of on us, and it's on being clear about what we need. You know, when our members, the producers, engage with vendors, it sure helps when they are clear about their needs, right? And we almost never are fully clear about our needs because we don't fully know. You know, I need a CRM software because I was told I need a CRM software. I don't really know what questions I'm trying, right? And so,
Yeah.
So to the extent we and our members, our producers, can do a little bit of that work ourselves to figure out why we're looking for these solutions, what, like we talked about earlier, what questions are we trying to answer, what problems are we trying to solve, that will probably enable vendors to more clearly answer that, because the question will actually be asked, that the needs will be identified. And the other thing you said, Jennifer, which I thought was so critical, and I value it every time I talk to someone and they do this, is articulating the limits of what can be done with a solution. I think it's always really trustworthy to me when a vendor says, here's what we do, but you know what, here's what we don't. So and we might evolve to it, and if you're willing to engage with us to get there, you know, great. But if this is what you need tomorrow, we may not be able to solve that problem. It may seem counterintuitive because you want to be able to tell people you can solve all their problems and do it, but it certainly builds a relationship of trust a whole lot better, and a long-term relationship in which you can work together to get to solving those problems. I find when when you very clearly say what you can do and what is not within your abilities right away.
And actually, that's one of the things that Jennifer mentioned is the vendor survey question. Produced. I found that tool, and in all honesty, I haven't met with a grower yet that has put that questionnaire in front of me and said, "Hey, this is a tool I was provided." But as a vendor, I've taken that survey and really have studied it intensely because it asks some very, very good questions that every producer should have memorized, not just for a food safety purchase decision, but for any investment in capital equipment or technology infrastructure at their operation, whether you're a farm or making pizza in a restaurant. It doesn't. Those questions are very well thought through and help the producer gain kind of get an image of what is this company like, what are is important to them, and how are they going to see me as a partner in their process, or how important am I going to be as a partner in their process? Am I just going to be a little, just a one of 100,000 customers they have, or am I? This is going to be actual partnership. I thought that was such an amazing tool for growers to utilize, and I for those producers on here, I really recommend you go on there and print that thing out and tape it to the monitor, because it's a great tool for helping to measure the type of partner you're looking to work with.
Well, lightning round. We have 3 minutes left, so I'm going to let you guys each have 1 minute to just give us your opinion of what is the most important thing you think people need to know with food safety and traceability. Now, go ahead, Jennifer.
The traceability is not about recalls. It's not about recalls when you have the lot number and you're figuring out where it went. It's the other way. It's the outbreak investigations where you have no clue what somebody ate, where it came from, and that's the question. That's the problem we're looking to solve. So I think understanding why FDA is proposing these rules, they're looking to solve a different problem than what the industry is accustomed to solving. And we could have a whole other conversation about that.
So I echo that completely, but what I will say is food safety is not a competitive issue. Food safety, we all need to be working together to ensure that we hold ourselves to the highest food safety standards. And so when it comes to, there are all sorts of things that, we want to do better than our competitors. We want to do, when it comes to food safety, we want everyone to be doing the gold standard, because we want to be able to provide safe and healthy produce to the American consumer, and to not create situations where there's any doubt or concern. Any doubt or concern hurts all of us, right? And it hurts all consumers. And so, yeah, that's my top point would just be, this is not a competitive issue. This is everyone wins when we do this right.
I want to echo what Marnie just said there, because there's not, all across the country, we can hold our cards close to our chests when it comes to my fertility program that's being used out in the field, that's has a secret sauce in it that gets my tomatoes looking or super sweet and last long on the shelf. That's stuff you hold close to your chest. But changes in that, or one grower doing something different in their fertility program than another, isn't going to take down the whole industry. The whole tomato market. One bad tomato going out into the restaurant world and getting somebody sick from a salad bar and there can be a whole nother discussion on how do you know it came from the grower? Take all that aside. If everyone's not following these practices, it impacts. There's growing. The agronomic part's one thing, but on the food safety side, it can take down the whole industry, the whole chain along with it. It just went from one recall. the cantaloupes it was the most recent, one that took down an industry in one summer. There was no cantaloupes to be found for for the whole season. So, I mean, that's a perfect example of why it's important that we as the industry adopt these practices and believe in them. That's the important part, is to not think that we're just doing them just to make us feel good. They do make a difference.
Thank you. Want to once again thank Dr. Jennifer McEntire with United Fresh, Marnie Carlin with CEA, and Mike LaRose for being our panel today. And our time is up. I know you all have other panels to get to. If anyone has further questions from the attendants, please feel free to email BioSafe and we will reach out to see if we can get those answered. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take
Thanks
care.
so much.